started talking about trends, right? And also, I think you used the word noise. So you were looking for the next customer and not seeing the trends here. And that's kind of when we talked with Craig, what would be the topic of this talk? Actually, is you got your freedom when you did your exit out from the company, and now you can see more clearly now, those trends, signals that are coming. And Craig has a presentation on topic, so I think this is your cue, and then we'll have some more Q&A at the end.
What is the thing that you really need to know, and why do you want to know it? Because it's going to help you when you come up to a corner to know what's going to happen before you turn the corner. I'll explain a bit more. Does this look familiar to anybody? I would assume most of you in here have a calendar that looks like this, or have had it in the past. This is not my old calendar. I took this off the internet, but mine looked very similar to this. It was full. I was hopping from meeting to meeting. I never had time to think. And when I got home at night, I had to spend time with my family, and I was traveling. So it was really hard. When you did have some downtime, you want to decompress. So I have a little bit of PTSD when I see that, because it's like, I never want to go back to that again. This is actually what my calendar looks like next week. And I would say that's a little busier than it normally is. I have just a few meetings, and I might even have my dog on there that I've got blocked out to go take him for a walk, but I don't have much. And this is the way it's been since I left the business. I have a lot more free time to just think and read and listen and follow topics that I didn't know I was interested in, or that I just didn't have time to be interested in before. So I have a lot more time, and that's one of the things that I've learned, that since I've left, I have a lot more time. It's given me the ability to see other things, to see some trends, and see some ways that you can find the signal through the noise of your daily sort of life. And if I were running a business again, or I were in it, I would definitely try to carve out time for myself to do this sort of thing, because I feel it's really important. Because as I talked about with this example of SaaS and our business changing, we had our heads in the sand. We were not out talking to the market. We weren't really listening to what was going on out there. We weren't talking to our customers as much. And so we really became insular and talking and discussing and fighting. And that's, I think, what ultimately caused us to miss some trends that were going on. So what if you could see clearly into the future, right? What if you knew where you could go to find the signal? And does everybody understand what I mean by signal versus noise? Any questions on that? It's I think, a very powerful symbolic way of looking at it. If you knew that something was happening, would you do something different? Right? If you had information that something was changing, or that something was going on somewhere else, would that allow you to be better prepared for when that corner comes up and you have to turn and look and see what's going on? And that's what this little guy's doing. So how do you know what's around there, right? It's all about finding the right sources that help you, that give you good insight and information that you can still make your own decision, but giving you some insight into what's going on around the corner. You have to have the right sources, and there's definitely some great places to look. And what I want to share is, how do you find, what are some of those signals that are out there? Has anybody heard of Silicon Valley Bank? No? Okay. So, as you know, Silicon Valley Bank had collapsed. And this article, by the way, is from, I believe, March 10th. And they're just talking about the 48-hour collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, where we learned that it was in trouble, and then over the weekend gets sold. Good news, all the account holders, all their money was saved, but all the stockholders and bondholders and everything, they all lost everything. Well, that 48 hours, I remember people on that Thursday and Friday, I was getting emails as part of different groups that I'm part of, And they're like, hey, have you heard about what's going on with Silicon Valley Bank? We're trying to get our money out right now. What should we do? And there was like panic amongst people because they didn't know, would the government eventually save them and protect them? So there was a lot of panic going around. But that was the first time I heard of it. I heard of it that Thursday before the Saturday or the Sunday that they were essentially failed or saved. But what would you do if you were an entrepreneur and you knew that Silicon Valley Bank was in trouble or that it could fail, right? What if you knew that information? What would you do? What if it was your bank? What would you do if you knew that information? Well, I know for me, there's a $250,000 FDIC limit, right? So you know the government's going to protect you in that case. But if you had $5 million in Silicon Valley Bank, I would make sure I'd have other accounts set up at other banks. I would distribute the money a little bit so that I have some diversity and I wouldn't feel like all of my eggs are in one basket. That's what I would do. That's one of the things I would do. So someone did know that it was happening, and they told us. But it was buried in the noise out there. This is a website called Seeking Alpha. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but this was published in December of 2022. And they did the analysis, and they said, this is likely going to fail, because they did all the math. They looked at their books. They knew what was going on. And they said, this is going to be a problem. And so they said it 3 months before. Did anybody listen? I'm sure there were a couple people that were like, well, maybe, maybe not. But with hindsight, how great would it be to have that information if you were a Silicon Valley Bank customer, right? You could prepare for it better. So that's one example. And what if you knew what the smartest people in the room were doing, what kind of financial decisions they were making? Would you do something different? Is that an indication that something is coming? If people are selling or buying, that's usually the smart people are like, okay, something's going on there, right? You'd want to know. So when the market was peaking, let me just make sure I got this. Yeah, and so November 2021, the stock market was peaking. And there were some really smart people that were out there selling a lot of their stock. The CEO of Microsoft sold half of his stock, $285 million. This gentleman here, who I'll talk about in a minute, Chamath, he publicly said he sold $700 million of stock. And then you probably know Elon Musk, he sold $10 billion of Tesla stock in November 2021. Elon Musk ended up buying Twitter, but that was 6 months later before that deal was announced, so I'm not sure he was selling this with the intent of buying Twitter, but he's a very smart guy who has made a lot of good business decisions over the years, and he was selling stock November of 2021. Just to remind everybody where that was, right up there. I think with hindsight, we see that they timed the market pretty darn well, okay? So that's all great, right? These guys are selling stock. What does that mean for me? Well, we kind of know that now we know in March, April, and May, things were really going south for the stock market, which caused problems in the sort of business world because interest rates were going up and things really got kind of haywire here. What if you knew in advance that was happening? Well, this is a podcast. Has anybody heard this one before? Yeah, a few of you, okay. So this is a really good podcast, and the gentleman right here on the left, that's Chamath, he's on that podcast. He's the one that said on December 4th, 2021, if the smartest people in the room are selling, you probably should be too. And he was one of those guys selling. He actually says in this segment, he's like, yeah, I sold 800 million a couple weeks ago, and wow, the tech stock market has been down 30% since then in 4 weeks. He was astonished that was happening. But he's still a really smart guy. And there's a later episode where they reference back to this and they talked a lot about this exact comment. They just said, when the smart people are selling, take that as a cue that something's going on, right? They know something more than we do. So Signal versus noise. These guys mentioned it in a podcast. They explicitly said it. And what did anybody do about it? I mean, I'm sure some people sold, but I think this is just a really nice example. And then, of course, with COVID, right? What would you do if you knew what the impact of COVID was going to be? It's sort of 2020 is hindsight now, but if you think back to what was going on in late January of 2020, you're actually close to northern Italy where like things were shutting down and it was pretty bad. But even that, did you think, okay, the whole world's going to shut down and there's going to be all these deaths, and what are the knock-on effects of that? So this is just an example of the type of media messaging of what was happening at that time. So people were saying, right, it's kind of like the common flu, don't get crazy, right? Not the end of the world, calm down a bit, it's going to be okay, which that's not a bad message, but that misses the point of what could happen. And you can see the date on that, right, January 29th, I think? Yeah. So here's another article that I pulled. I just did a search, and this is from China on the same date. China was just at that moment saying, you know what? We're gonna postpone, or did they say delay the start? I don't quite remember. Yeah, delay the start. They weren't even postponing it. They're just, okay, maybe in a couple months this will come back. It'll be good. We're just going to delay the start of the football season in China. And we kind of know what was going on there for months. But, okay, China is saying we're just going to delay the start. Everything's going to be okay. Well, same date as I mentioned before. Well, there was somebody on that same date who put out a lengthy tweet thread that talked about all of the second-order effects that were coming. And he even said, you know, hey, I don't know if this is right, but these are all the things that could be going on if this is the pandemic that the healthcare people have been warning us about. So he put out on that date, January 30th, and this is a pretty famous thread now, if anybody has seen it, but he talked about all these different long-term trends: face masks, decentralization of medicine, land versus cloud. What else we got up there? Remote work. He's talking about reversals, you know, Airbnb and Uber potentially going under, like all different kinds of things that they didn't go under, but boy, they were struggling because they lost all their business. So if you knew that information on January 30th, you know, what would you do differently? Let me just make sure, yeah. What would you do differently because you knew that? Like, we all know now how that pandemic went, so we might say, okay, I'm going to buy computers because I know there's going to be a computer shortage when everybody else starts buying because they're moving to remote work. Or, hey, you know what, it's going to get really bad in my line of business, maybe it's travel or entertainment or something, so I better not hire some people or buy some airline tickets or just kind of be safe. So having the information and insight of what might happen and what from reliable sources, you still have to make the decision about what does it mean for your business. Some businesses like mine, it was great, right? We were well prepared. We had all the computers we needed. So for us to go from, we had a plan in March of 2020 as a company that we were going to roll for a month and do a 1 day a week work from home thing for everybody to test our systems, to make sure that they all worked. That lasted 1 day, and then we were remote the rest of for months after that, right? It just accelerated and compressed. So the question is, what do you do if you have that information? What could you do? And that's what I'm trying to get you to just understand, is that there are signals out there of things that are going on, but there's a ton of noise, and it's hard to segment that. But if you start looking for the right people who are reliable and trustworthy and thinking big, oftentimes you can get that insight, and then you make your own decision on what to do. So now I want to talk about some signals that you might want to be aware of. If I were to say that, if I were to come back in 6 months or a year and do this presentation, like, what might we be saying then that, boy, I would love to have known about that now? So this is Balaji again, the same guy that talked about the tweet storm of COVID. I don't know if has anybody heard of this $1 million bet that he did? Okay, one or two. He bet somebody $1 million that Bitcoin was going to be at a $1 million price point in 90 days. He did this bet about 6 weeks ago. Nobody believed him that it's going to be $1 million. It's not going to be $1 million, but he did the bet anyway. And people are like, got a lot of attention in the tech world and everything. And they're like, what is this guy doing? What's the deal? Well, he did the bet, and what he's really talking about and trying to draw people's attention to is hyperinflation. He believes that the financial system is in such a state that we're entering a hyperinflation era that is going to be bad for fiat currencies and good for crypto. And he's basically showing, he's got some other examples here of countries and how fast the time required for prices to double. What happens if that happens to us now? What happens if that happens in 2023 or 24? So he's just trying to draw attention to all of that. And you can see here, he admits it. He's like, I just burned $1 million to tell you they're printing trillions. Because he believes so strongly that there's going to be a problem with hyperinflation and the fiat currencies, the euro, the dollar, you name it. So he is trying to tell us something. He's a smart guy. We saw it with COVID. What do you do with that information? Doesn't mean you have to run for the hills and cash out and sit on your euros, but you just want to think about that. If you have the time, I'd want to think about it. So how do you use ChatGPT if that's going to be like this awesome, amazing, transformative technology, right? People are saying we've hit this inflection point about AI. Has anybody tried ChatGPT? Okay, quite a few, that's great. I've tried it too. It's really, I didn't know what to do. So how do you find out if you can be that 10x? How can you make somebody really, really good? And there's this person, Rowan Cheng, that he has gone through and he's sharing. He's a great follow on Twitter, by the way, for his, and I'll give you all these at the end. But he's a great follow because he's talking every single day about what's happening in AI. What is going on and how can you use it? And what I really love about what he's doing is that he basically gives it to you almost like a translation. Here's the format, here's exactly what you should change so that you can get the most out of ChatGPT and maybe, just maybe, turn you or your business or one of your employees into 10 times better than they were before. And where I heard a lot about this was on that All In podcast, because they were talking about ChatGPT and how incredible it is and the 10x engineer stories and from a 1x engineer overnight. So it's really, really impressive. I won't go through these, but you can kind of see he's making it easy for anybody who's listening to the signal to get a lot more out of ChatGPT than somebody who's not listening for the signal or doesn't know where the signal is. So he's even saying on this tweet, and I remember this is maybe a week or two ago, ChatGPT, AutoGPT, and GPT-4 are basically dead. Forget them. There's this new thing, what is that called? Code Interpreter plugin. Again, I don't even know what it is, but if this guy's saying it's important, he's the AI expert, I'm going to go find out, right? I'm going to go find out. But I needed time to listen to those podcasts, to then see who this was, to start testing things. You see where I'm going with this? You might even know where the signal is, but then you need time to execute on, to make your own decision of what is it that could be useful for you. But if you're listening to so much noise, it's really hard to know what's signal and what's noise. And the last thing I wanted to briefly talk about is online communities. This is another thing that I want to point you to, raise your awareness on, how online communities can be an extremely defensible business moat. Last October, go ahead.
What is defensible?
So think of a castle where they have a moat around it, so it's hard for people to get in, and it's defensible, meaning that your competition cannot.
So that you
Yeah.
cannot enter to that community.
Yeah, so it's harder, much harder. Think like eBay. How many companies have tried to do what eBay does, but because they have the buyers and the sellers, that creates this network effect? That's a defensible moat. If you don't have a network effect, a community can be a defensible moat for you, a very strong defensible moat. And there are lots of tools out there that are kind of helping this, but I've never seen someone put their finger on it and say online communities are an incredible tool that you should be looking at, and how to do that. So this is Greg Eisenberg. So with his company, his studio is called Late Checkout, but he has a school called Community College where you can go for 1 month and you can learn how to build an online community, how to start building an audience, how to create engagement, and then how to turn it into a true community. And he doesn't say start with your product. That's what we all kind of, I think, have been told, is start with the product. He's not saying only start with community, but he's saying if you can start with the community, that's a great way of getting started. And he's got a whole series of steps to show you how to do that. So I just have one example here of somebody who talked about how they're building they're building an audience in their free time, and they've got 10,000 followers in, I don't know what it is, probably a few months. Greg Eisenberg in the class says, you should be able to build a 100,000 person following on Twitter in 6 months if you follow his plan. So I won't dig too much into that, but that's one of those things that, you know, the signal helps you look around the corner. It gives you information that helps you make a better decision for when you get to that corner so that you're better prepared. It's like having a mentor who's been there and done that, who's gone down that path before. They have some idea what's around the corner and they can help you. So those of you that have mentors, that's one other good way of really looking around the corner, but there's lots of signals out there too that can help. So this is the list of different things that I want you to take out your phone and be ready to start following people on Twitter, or you can take a picture at the end here, but I just aggregated everything together so that you had it in one place. And the first one here was Balaji talking about COVID impact. He's very prolific on Twitter. He's a really good source. Seeking Alpha, I mentioned that one. That's the website that talks about financial things that are happening. They captured the SVB collapse 3 months early. All In Podcast, if you're not listening to that, that's really good. There's stuff you have to wade through that is you can ignore, but they really, it's like insiders talking about what's going on in tech, and there's just some really good information in there, business building and stuff. So looking forward, what are some of the things I think that are interesting and important? Right, Rowan Cheng for the ChatGPT, like these are the cheat codes for how to get the most out of ChatGPT, and I guarantee within 3 weeks, he's gonna have other cheat codes up there of how to use it and make it even better for you. Community, Late Checkout, it's a studio, but it's a community building. I actually shared one of the videos with Alia, and so maybe she can show it sometime at another kind of event. It's about 45 minutes. I can't share them all because you actually had to pay for it, but I wanted to give people a sample of that. And I think that was the last one, so I'm just gonna pause for a second. If you want me to check, I'll check, because there might be more, but.
Can we share PowerPoint?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. I had one more on there that I took off, and I'll just say it, Lynn Alden, if you're interested. She's amazing on the financial side. Please connect with me. Happy to schedule Zoom calls or whatever with you anytime. I love helping entrepreneurs. It's, I think, one of my passions. And I have a lot of cool pictures right now on Instagram that are going up about Slovenia from my trip this past weekend. So it's been really nice. And you might even recognize some of the places and help me figure out exactly where they were, because I'm not sure in some cases. But thank you all for listening. That's what I wanted to share on signal versus noise.
Cool. We'll get to the Q&A, but first a question for you. So, okay, so you said that after you went out or you exited the company, you had enough time actually to research the market and so on. So should everybody here just start following you on Twitter and, instead of, and you're just gonna share what you find out, or are you gonna start a community?
I'm not gonna start a community, but I'll participate in communities. I love Twitter. I think what I love about Twitter is the ability to curate who I'm listening to. So this whole idea of signal versus noise, like Elon Musk, I don't follow him. I don't want any of his political nonsense, right? I don't care. That's just not important. But people like Rowan Chang, and I've got a list of, I must follow 1,000 people. Some of them aren't active anymore. I need to clean that up. But I follow people that I love the information that they provide. I'm not as good actually as resharing it and saying, hey, everybody in my community, you should follow this, because I just sort of assume people are doing that. And not everybody's on Twitter, right? So yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, I'll try and share a little bit, but yeah.
Cool. I guess you get some new followers here. And Alia asked actually, so what would you do differently, based on what you know right now? Can you go deeper into that?
So think about those trends that I talked about and that I think are going to be really big in the future. One is ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, the ability for an average engineer to be 10x better, the ability for a marketer to write content 10x better, the ability for trainers to be 10x better by using that tool. I would try to build a company. If I were starting another business right now, I would try never to get more than 30 people. Because 30.
Nice.
That's what I would try for. Because from my experience, it was really fun I liked the people that I worked with, right? And so I liked knowing everybody's name, and I liked being able to have time to talk to them and help them. And that's very hard when you get past 30 people. And so for me, with tools like ChatGPT, with the advancements of cloud technology, with just sort of things that are happening, and they even talk about this on the All In podcast. So they're talking about, they say it about 3 episodes ago. They're like, if a couple of smart people get together, they put a 20-person company together, they could take on Stripe. Because with 20 people, they can do as much as the bloated organization that they are. They're going to need a lot less capital, a lot less people and overhead, and therefore their costs can be lower, and so they can do what Stripe is doing. So think about that from a signal versus noise perspective. What would you do with that information if you thought that somebody could come along and do that with a much smaller group? So I've seen it where the bureaucracy that we built at Cleverbridge, it's painful watching that. It's painful having to tear it down, right? Get people to do work. One of my employees likes to say, nobody likes to do work around here. So they get together in a meeting and they just try their hardest to make sure that they're not doing anything. And that's why people suck. And why I would try to have 30 people or less. And yeah, so that's one of the big things for me. I mean, I'm a technology guy, so I would want a business that's scalable. We had a great conversation with one of your peers about her flower business the other night, and I see a way that could be there's some amazing opportunities in that where she would never have to get over 10 or 20 people, but she could create a pretty big business. And so again, signal versus noise, listen to that All In podcast. They talk about this kind of stuff. And that's where, honestly, a lot of what you're hearing me say came from, to be fair. So signal versus noise, right? Cut out the noise as much as you can and focus on that signal when you can. What was the hardest thing to overcome and how did we do it? That's a great question. There's a couple things that come to mind. One was the baby, right? It was my baby, and starting to call my baby ugly and start to leave it behind a bit was very hard. I think it was really hard when, for me personally, the hardest part was when I was no longer involved in sales activities. I was no longer close to the customers. When I was doing just corporate stuff, managing people, managing reviews, having weekly meetings with my subordinates, I like that, but I loved being out with the clients. I loved solving problems. I loved developing the technology, coming up with ideas on how to do things better. So the hardest part, firing people the first time was really hard. I remember doing that and having no experience and just questioning myself, is this the right thing? Should I do this? am I doing the right thing? What about that person we're firing? And then, of course, it becomes easier, and you just realize, no, this is the right thing. It's good for them. It's good for the business, and you just you're like, yeah, no problem. But doing it the first time was really hard. So I could probably go on and on about a lot of things that were hard, but I hope that gives you some perspective that I have. Do I put myself first? I did. I did when I was running Cleverbridge, and I say that because my wife was, it was like, okay, I have to go to Germany, or I have to go to Russia, or I have to go to California. Whatever was going on, she had to take on, or taking care of our daughter, or dealing with house stuff, whatever it is, construction, all kinds of stuff. So I had to put myself first. I feel I had to put myself first. Now I don't. It's much more, I'm there, I had my fun, right? I did something that was really fun. It also was painful. But now I keep asking my wife, what do you want to do? Do you want to do something? Do you want to create a business? What is it what's your dream? And I will stand by and support you for that, because she did that for me. So that's how I kind of think about it right now. That's also why I'm not doing much right now. I'm just giving her time to figure out, is there something? She wants to renovate a house, and we're doing that, so she's having her second dream. So I saw the statue. There's a bookstore. I think it's that street, Vodnikom. So yes, I saw that, yeah. Yeah, very interesting. I'm working on, I don't know if you were here, but this week I have 4 pages that a researcher here in Ljubljana did for me to trace back my relatives. And so tomorrow we're going to go kick the tires on some small villages and look and crawl around some cemeteries and stalk some dead people.
Yeah, and can you share how you first found out that you have roots in Slovenia?
Yeah, so when I was here in 2019, I had done some research, family ancestry stuff, and I knew I was, I had one grandparent that was of German descent, one that was of Italian descent, one that was Yugoslavia. I thought it was Czech, or maybe Slovak. I wasn't really sure. And then another one that was just a total mix of Irish and French and other stuff. So when I was here in Slovenia 4 years ago, like the first, I started meeting people, and the first question was, oh, Vodnik, are you Slovenian? No, I don't think, I think it's Czech, something like that. Enough people asked me, and I think the last night I was here, we were out, and I got home to the hotel at 11 p.m. or something, and I logged into Ancestry.com because I hadn't looked at it in 7 or 8 years. And I went and started looking at the towns that were Yugoslavia, and when I actually looked at them in a map, like, oh, yeah, this actually looks like it's Slovenia. And, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So that's how it kind of happened, and yeah, it's been fun. I joined the Slovenian American sort of heritage group, and that's where I started getting some more information about genealogy, and then Alia worked with somebody here to connect me for this trip. And I'll probably come back next summer and do more research. Once I digest all this information I have and look through the online cemeteries and gravestones to figure out, okay, where should I go and who should I be talking to?
So maybe, I have a last one before we go to networking part. Here are a lot of entrepreneurs still in the phase so they're struggling, so they're still in this first year when you have to find clients and so on. And what would be your one advice to them, if that's a fair question? I mean, I know it's different for everyone, but what would be your one advice to struggling entrepreneurs?
I think there's 2 pieces to that. One is focus, right? So don't try to be everything to everyone, and don't go just sort of being unsure and then just shooting out and spreading messages everywhere. And the second thing is talk to people, right? Talk to businesses. We learned so much in just talking to our clients that helped us know what do they want, because again, it goes back to what's the problem you're trying to solve. And if you focus on the problem, you can find a solution and they will likely buy it from you. So it's just about focus and make sure you're talking to customers, because you can sit in a room and have a theory all day for a year and never get anywhere. You can have beautiful spreadsheets, you can have the most perfect business plan, but if you're not out talking to people, it's not good.
One more thing, June is coming, which is going to be really big for us. So we'll have 2 more guests, we'll have summer party and so on. So please follow us. Thank you, Craig, and thank you all of you for coming. And let's go outside and talk.
Thank you.